Grüß, willkommen in einem video. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 21 of my figure gaming video series. In this video, I'll be covering making flexible rivers for your playing area. In my previous videos, I showed many examples that showed my rivers embedded into a cork playing tile or alternatively painted onto an MDF sheet. This looks good as it's three-dimensional in some way, but lacks flexibility. The other issue is, if you're going to embed your rivers in the playing area, then the playing area needs to be thick enough and made of material which allows you to dig out a river. My playing area ideas uses a 120 by 80 centimeter lightweight pin board. This is very light, so carrying around the playing area the size is easy as long as your car can accommodate it. The issue is this type of playing area cannot take any dugout river. It's too thin and not strong enough. This shows the playing area before I covered it with turf. There are two solutions. One is you could simply paint the rivers onto your playing area which you can't dig out. The other solution is to create flexible or movable river pieces of terrain. This is similar to the hills I've previously created. This is made of 3mm MDF board with the edges smoothed down with a sanding block on a drill. Instructions for how to do this can be found in one of my other series of videos. In this case, the rivers are 40 centimeters long, as I'm using these for my 120 by 80 centimeter playing area. The MDF pieces are 9 centimeters wide, but with a curve. Other solutions are possible, such as straight edges and the terrain piece being 12 centimeters wide. However, this all really depends on the players, and I'm just showing you what I have at the present moment. It's all preference. The main issue is ensuring the river looks sufficiently like water. This shows the river terrain piece sort of on its side. The river colour I use may not be the best option, and players can choose whatever they feel is best or looks more watery. These are the 4 river terrain pieces I use. They're all designed to be joined end to end. The blue is not yet completed as I need to get a water-like effect onto it. I did try using a very glossy blue paint, which gave me a kind of a good effect, but spraying the terrain with PVC glue reduced that effect, so that's not the solution. You may need to paint it over again once the turf has been added. In the end, I decided to use a clear water-based floor polish on top of the standard blue paint, and that seemed to work reasonably well. Do it after you've sprayed it with the PVC glue, however. Before I move on to show you what these pieces look like on the playing area, a quick comment on my obsession with 3D embedded rivers. Back in 1978, my local hobby store sold a range of 30 centimeter square tiles, 30 centimeter square tiles, which you could assemble into a playing area of your choice. I purchased about 4 of these tiles and was very impressed with the embedded streams in 2 of them. I created my first 30 centimeter tile back then to fill out my playing area to about 10 tiles, using cork tiles, European cork tiles, and digging out streams. I have no idea how I did this, as I lacked a router back in the old days. I suppose I did it manually, but in the end I managed to duplicate the effect quite successfully. Now, I have to admit, even then I realised the biggest issue with embedded rivers was their lack of flexibility, which in the most case was not really an issue when I played game, but always niggled me at the back of my mind. I quickly discovered that fighting across a water feature gave you typically a boring game, so the water feature closed off a flank on the playing area, and it was really there only to add a bit of realism and a bit of bling on my playing area rather than actually being a part of my playing area or game. Because I liked these old tiles quite well, I had to find a playing area material which allowed me to dig out a river in it. As a result, I stayed with cork tiles, which allowed this, but I was never really happy with the lines in my cork tile playing area. I went down the path of 30 centimeter square cork tiles to minimize those damn lines. This shows the reverse of one of my 60 centimeter cork tiles. Incidentally, I use these for DBA and DBM, and they work very well, but typically I don't like putting more than one on a playing area. I will in some cases have 2, but that pretty much is the limit for these tiles. They also ended up being incredibly heavy. Another issue with cork tiles is they sometimes bent or didn't stay flat. This shows an example of that particular issue. This is a 30 centimeter cork tile, 2 sheets of cork tiles. You'll notice the bend in it. For cork tiles, I resolved this by packing the tiles in a box which flatten the cork tiles quite tightly. If the tiles still bend, then you have to place them together, with the edges at the same height, even though the centre is raised or the edges are raised. After a while, the cork tile will flatten, but with a double cork tile, it takes a long time. This is a known issue with 30 centimetre cork tile. It's not really a major thing, but with 60 centimetre cork tile with a MDF centre, the issue actually becomes a lot more significant. Incidentally, my latest cork tiles don't use embedded rivers. They just use a single sheet of cork, and if it bends, if you place it down on a playing area, within a fairly short period of time it flattens out. So I was actually creating a rod for my own back by trying to put embedded rivers into my playing areas. For the 60 centimetre tiles, in order to resolve this bending effect, I couldn't make a box which could store them tightly. They're just too large. So I have to stack them against the wall, which causes them to actually create a slight bend anyway. If I place them in a playing area, the bends for different tiles will differ, so the edges, while there are less edges, become even more pronounced. Because the tile is thicker, as it's made up of two cork tiles and a 3mm MDF board holding it all together, the bend takes a lot longer to flatten out. The final issue, of course, with weight, a 60 centimetre square tile weighs a lot. I can carry 2 easily, but 4 is a struggle. It was a good idea when I first thought about it, but unfortunately it didn't work out the way I thought. However, I must admit I do use it for DBA and DBM games, which only require 30 centimetres or 60 centimetres square playing areas, or at the most 60 by 120. The final solution that I decided to adopt was use a very thick, lightweight playing area, which is 120 by 80 centimetres in size. However, as already mentioned, I cannot embed rivers into this, so I need a new solution. My other issue is ancient games tend to, sometimes do tend to need rivers, which is an additional incentive to create flexible rivers. Now, these are specific battles where battles occurred over rivers, so they were rare, but they did occur. Now let's move back to my river terrain pieces. This shows the river terrain piece on my Ancients playing area, which is not my best playing area, but I had to set up this in a garage for the video, and it was the easiest thing for me to set up. Of course, there is a 3mm thick edge. You can minimize this by placing lichen along the edges, but for most of the games I don't really bother. The river pieces can be joined together in one of two ways. Basically, each edge is 9 centimetres wide with a 3 centimetre wide river and 3 centimetre lips on each side, so you can put a whole element. You'll notice these elements are longer than the tiles. This is because these were designed for my 120 by 80 centimetre playing area. I will create 30 centimetre long river sections for my 30 centimetre tiles in the future, or at least I was planning. In the end I decided against it. These river pieces are designed to run along a flank, but there's no reason why you can't create 3-way pieces, curves or other river shapes which could be placed anywhere. As this playing area is designed for a game of lost battles which requires more flexible rivers, I will do this in the future, for those particular rules at least. You'll notice in this image that the playing area is a rather wide road running through it. This is my Ancients playing area. In most ancient rules, roads have no effect. Thus, I normally use 3 centimetre wide roads. This was also my original road configuration for my WRG Micro Armour games, although it did not work so well with Micro Armour. I also use this for skirmish games, although I must admit it's rare, but nonetheless it works well for skirmish. In the distance is my edge ridge terrain. I painted these light green initially before covering it with turf, thus you can see light green showing through. These days I use a green which matches the turf I use. Finally, you'll notice light grey lines running through some of my tiles. These tiles have been returfed, and I did not fully paint the black roads first, which was an error. If you are returfing tiles, it's important to paint the surface so the colour is consistent. Turfing tiles does not fully cover everything below it. The final point is the edges. If you're not going to cover the edges with lichen, make sure you paint and fully turf the edges of your terrain piece. You'll notice a few spots here this has not been done well, so I'll probably have to go back and clean it up. This shows the river with the glossy varnish on it. As you can see, it looks reasonably watery-like. I originally made this video back in the mid-2020s, and since then, my opinion of rivers has changed dramatically. These days, I always use fixed rivers in the playing areas, which are simply painted and covered with a glossy covering, as you can see here. While I like the idea of changing river topologies between games, in the end it proved too difficult or provided minimal benefits. Other gamers may disagree, and in this video I've provided some ideas which could be used to create flexible rivers if you wish. But if you really needed flexible rivers, or if I ever did need it, I tend to go back to the felt. Doesn't look good, but the amount of games I have where I need this is so minimal, it satisfies my requirements. All the terrain pieces that you've seen earlier, the river terrain pieces, in the end I pretty much never used them, and I destroyed them as a result, or threw them away. So I, for myself, considered it a bit of a failure. However, I do know many other gamers do like the idea and they do use it successfully, so I certainly don't disagree with the basic idea. I certainly went down that path many years ago. It's just I've moved elsewhere. And so we come to an end of episode 20, which covers the making of flexible rivers. Denken Sie daran, immer viel Heimatland zu kämpfen.